Well, here's Sharmin to talk to us about digital wellbeing.
Thank you.
Give her a round of that.
Hi everybody, I am Sharmin and I'm the founder of Cooldown. And so I run digital wellbeing workshops and I'm also developing an app in this space. And basically what I want this talk to be is how my conception of digital wellbeing has actually changed a lot since I started. And I basically want to highlight some approaches that I actually find quite problematic and also find an alternative way of talking about digital wellness that goes beyond digital detoxing, screen time, and also the cult of productivity. And so when you work in a digital wellness startup, there is a huge focus on young people because it's really all about, people are like, okay, we need to talk about how technology is impacting the well-being of adolescents. And so one of the first things that I did was to talk to 15 and 16-year-olds about their relationship with technology. And what I discovered was that the responses were very mixed. And so while some people felt that Instagram was just this way of performing kind of like a fake life, and there are other people who actually said that being on the internet really helped them. Like it helped them feel more confident and actually have really difficult conversations that they would struggle to have face to face. And another teenager really insightfully noted, and it's something that we forget as adults, is that public spaces aren't particularly set up very well for 16-year-olds. So basically you're too old to hang around in the park, but you're too young to go to a bar. And so essentially, where else are you going to hang out? Because a lot of your friends are going to be online. And so, given that there's so much focus on adolescent well-being and the relationship between technology and mental health, we've got to be really careful about how we approach this as a problem. And so, for example, there's this study by the Oxford Internet Institute study. And if you read the media headlines, you would think that there would be this massive social media-induced mental health crisis. But actually, when we look at a lot of the recent research, actually the Oxford Internet Institute says that technology use and screen time accounts for about 0.4% of adolescent well-being. So things like getting enough sleep and eating breakfast, for example, are greater indicators of digital wellness. Of wellness, I should say. And then there's this other report which came out by Hope Lab and the Wellbeing Trust, and it kind of looks at the relationship between social media and mental health and the impact that has on young people. And again, the results are very mixed. And so basically there are positive elements to it and there are some negative elements to it. And one of the key findings I want to highlight here is this one, which is about response to social media when feeling depressed, stressed, or anxious. So of those, so you might make the assumption that those who feel depressed or anxious actually find that social media makes them feel worse. But looking at this, 14 to 22-year-old social media users who suffer from moderate to severe depressive symptoms, of those, 30% felt better after using social media, 22% felt worse, and 47% felt that it wasn't really impacting them much at all. And so basically it's a very mixed, the findings here are very mixed, and so we can't make huge kind of claims about kind of how technology impacts well-being, not with the current research that we have. But if we look at a lot of the campaigns that we have online, so much of them are encouraging people to unplug and go on a digital detox. And social media is kind of seen as this monolithic thing. And really, I kind of want to argue that things are more complicated because some teenagers will benefit from it and some won't. And it's a similar story with adults, which is we're dealing with incredibly varied problems. And so we can't have a one-size-fits-all approach. But this idea of technology as being something that you disconnect from is something that I actually think we need to be a bit more careful about. And then, of course, we have screen time tools. So Apple and Android have released their digital well-being tools. And this, again, is really just about measuring wellness and health, and it exists in this entire ecosystem of health apps, which are basically saying that you can measure your health and success through decontextualized metrics. And I would say that that is potentially part of the problem rather than part of the solution, because really it's just these numbers. And potentially, if it's relevant to you, it's kind of shocking and shaming you into change. And if it's not, then it's just irrelevant. It's just another bit of information that you can't do anything with. And then the third kind of approach that we have is often this value-led approach. So we're seeing the shift towards intentional internet use. And whatever you do online, being done with a sense of purpose, so it adds value to your life. But so often these discussions that we have, and this is very evident in the work of, say, Cal Newport, all of this is framed as a productivity tool. And so actually we have a wider problem here, because it kind of has the logic of being like, oh, if only you spent as much time on your side hustle as you did on Facebook, then you'll be a billionaire by now. So things like stepping back, daydreaming, meditating, mindfulness, this is all used as a tool for focus. And so what are our alternatives? Because obviously when I'm running workshops, serious problems are being discussed, and people feel as if their online behavior is leading to a sense of unhappiness. And this is what I propose. So firstly, hold space. So allow people to tell you what their problems are instead of assuming what their problems are. And that means helping them explore their specific relationship and their specific behaviors with, social media, or I should say a specific social media platform, and helping them kind of come up with solutions that suit their own circumstances. Because, someone who is a journalist who has to rely on Twitter for professional opportunities is going to be very different from someone who has recently become a parent. And suddenly they're really worried about the impact their screen time is going to be having on their child. And the second point I want to make is to see relationships, don't see devices. Because so often we talk about the problem of the smartphone. Has the smartphone destroyed a generation? And so this is just one of the Instagram posts that I found online, which is, I wish I spent more time on my phone, said no one ever. And really, with this, we don't see specific behaviors and we don't see specific relationships that are being played here. And so basically what I argue is that we need to look beyond the phone and beyond social media as this monolithic thing. And the reason for this is that we have a tendency to ignore the fact that certain behaviors that may express themselves on social media are actually linked to a lot of things that are happening outside in our life and in society at large. And so actually one of the arguments that I want to make is that I actually see, for example, like racism and sexism as a wellness issue. And so, for example, if you're on a platform and it doesn't have a robust way of dealing with harassment and abuse, then that is actually, that's going to have a well-being impact on you. And that's not really something that's discussed. And so seeing how platforms can amplify and intensify abuse and existing power imbalances should actually be part of the well-being discussions that we have. And just to give you a more concrete example, if you're checking your work email at 6 a.m. and you find it really hard to set that boundary, then that's a relationship with your work and your colleagues and the attitudes that maybe you've internalized about what it is to be a successful employee. And unless you deal with that potentially dysfunctional relationship, it doesn't matter if you turn your phone to grayscale. That's not going to help. And the last point I want to make is that values aren't neutral either. And so if we're going into a value-led approach to intentional internet use, we've really got to question what is underlying that. And so this is a quote, this is a tweet from Elon Musk, which is, "There are easier places to work, but nobody ever changed the world on 40 hours a week. So the pressure that we put ourselves under, this is part of the ecosystem that is potentially leading to emotional distress that we so often discuss or can recognize. And so all too often, intentional internet use becomes shorthand for efficiency, self-optimization, and fighting digital distraction so that we can be more productive. And so my third point is to not accept value-led approaches uncritically. And, especially when it comes to policing leisure time. So do we see maintaining friendships by liking friends' posts on Instagram as potentially less valuable as learning a new language on Duolingo? It's looking at baby animals, which can de-stress us, seen as less valuable as like reading a paperback book. And if so, why? So why we should absolutely be shifting our attention to what adds meaning to our lives? If those values and intentions are focused on maintaining a system that equates productivity with wellness, then that is something to resist tooth and nail. In which case, wasting time can actually be one of the most valuable things that we can do. Thank you.